All right, now time to talk some D3 football results from the round of 32. Let's start things off, Jimmy. UW-La Crosse goes into St. John's. A hell of a game, but Johnny's pulled this one out, dude. 24-13 at home, and I think as we go through this list here, we're going to find the home teams did very well this weekend.
Yeah, home field advantage is a real thing, and we saw that. 9 degrees at kickoff in this one. Just been blisteringly cold. Aaron Severson had 357 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air for St. John's. What else can we expect from this kid? I mean, he's an absolute dog. Marcelio Mendez had 11 catches for 135 and a touchdown as well. So St. John's leaning on their passing attack, doing their thing with that, and they came out victorious. La Crosse did battle back. They scored late, and it blocked extra points, kept it a 4-point game, which was critical because obviously going down 3, you just kick a field goal to tie it. And then they got the ball back and did end up scoring for the dagger there at the end. But La Crosse battled, went into St. John's, a very tough environment to play in, and they gave them a run for their money, man, for sure.
Absolutely did, dude. And you talked about it. I mean, this game was a very competitive one and a low-scoring one, right? The first half, St. John's goes into halftime up 3-0 over a La Crosse team that both these squads, we have not come to expect their offenses to be lackluster on this stage. I think the credit needs to be shifted, obviously, to the defensive efforts for both these teams because I think these are two teams that the defense does not get enough love, right? We've talked about this La Crosse offense. We talked about the guy in the backfield in Gabe Lynch, who actually was held to probably his most minimal impact on the year, only 63 yards on the ground for him. The rushing attack from St. John's had a little bit more going for it. Not too much, I would say, that it was dominant on the ground. But, again, a big-time win for the St. John's squad at home. They continue to keep things rolling for SJUs. They had multiple takeaways on the defensive side of the ball. You look at one of the key plays in this one. La Crosse goes for it on 4th down, deep in St. John's territory. Instead of settling for 3, they turn it over on downs early. Felt like a pretty pivotal point in this matchup. And you also look at, this St. John's squad, for the 3rd time in program history, they've got 2 receivers with 1,000 yards on the season in Wheeler and Mendez, dude. That's a pretty sweet mark to eclipse.
No, absolutely. You have 2 guys that are playmakers like that. It makes it a lot easier on your quarterback too.
Yeah, you mentioned that 9-degree temperature. That's the coldest kickoff in Collegeville since at least 2000.
Ooh.
And what that tells me is that before 2000, they weren't recording that shit.
No, I can't.
That's exactly what that tells me. But let's move on. The next part of the slate here, Hobart goes into Susquehanna. This one, a very close 1-score contest, but the Riverhawks, they pull it out, Jim.
Yeah, so they went up 21-0 to start the game here, and that was thanks to their really well-balanced offensive attack. 198 passing yards, 202 rushing yards, so very, very multi-dimensional we saw in this one. And that's a nightmare to prepare for schematically. Obviously, we saw it putting up 42 points. And Josh Ehrlich with 3 passing touchdowns for the Riverhawks as well. It looked a little bit closer than it potentially actually was. It was 42-21 at one point, and Hobart fired back and scored 2 touchdowns late. But obviously a lot of fight in Hobart, and we saw that throughout the whole year too. They battled a lot late in the game, but Susquehanna pulls this one out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, I think, for a good majority of the game was a lot more dominant than I think the score shows. And this Riverhawk squad felt like they were, really in prime position. A Hobart touchdown halfway through the second quarter that helped them, but they were getting outplayed, I think, early on. And again, credit to them for coming back into this thing. A hell of a catch from Dominic when we posted that one on the Twitter. And can't use those clips because it's all of the ESPN Plus stuff. But a hell of a grab from him on the interception that was with one hand, a really big takeaway there. And you mentioned it, very multidimensional offense for this Riverhawk squad that we've, come to expect from them. But when you look at this and you look at the box score, they had a lot of really good things going. Hobart's passing attack, I think, did a really great job. And their defense has kind of been the focal point. They outgained Susquehanna 438 to 379, even though Susquehanna actually ran almost 30 more plays. They ran 29 more plays than Hobart and were outgained by over 50, 60 yards.
Yeah, Hobart's is really explosive. We saw that. Obviously, you have a lot of less plays and have a ton of yards. That leads to really explosive offense. You have to.
Yeah, Susquehanna had the one interception that certainly hurt them, but you look at the time possession in this one, 40 minutes to 20, the Riverhawks, and you win by 1 possession.
Yeah, I mean, when you run the ball for that many yards, you're gonna have the ball for a long time. You keep that clock running, and the time of possession can be huge.
And to be fair, one of those couple of those touchdowns came late, but I certainly wouldn't go as far as to say that's quote unquote garbage time, right? Hobart scores just over 7 minutes left in the game, and it's 28-42. They score again with over 3 minutes left, and all of a sudden this is a ball game, right? And they have a chance and are unable to capitalize on it there at the end. But that's not like a garbage time touchdown or two that kind of just makes the score look more interesting. It was early on, like I said, Susquehanna felt like had a really good handle on this one. At one point, it was 21-0. And I think that kind of tells you about the start of this game, 28-7 going into halftime. And Hobart came out and kudos to them, played some really complimentary football, put some points on the board. And we will say, so for as far as the game picks for next week, whether we're on campus somewhere, which is the goal, or if we do another little pick'em show on like Thursday night, it'll be one or the other. So we will get to the game picks later on in the week, which will be fun.
I hope so.
Yeah, right. But St. John Susquehanna is going to be a fun matchup. So we won't talk about them. We won't talk about them too much here as we get going. That's the first playoff win in over 3 decades for the Riverhawks. It was 1991. It was the last time that they got it done. And Susquehanna, they scored touchdowns on their first 4 possessions. So there you go. We talked about a 21-0 start, and it was 28-7. The offense could do no wrong in the first half for that Riverhawk squad. We can move over, though. One of the 2 WIAC squads to get knocked out this round, Jim. And, of course, the Wisconsin Conference, they have no teams remaining for the first time in a while, it feels like. And I think, the kind of the rhetoric has been that there is a lot more parity in the WIAC this year than there have been in years past. And while there might not be the heavy-hitting Whitewater or La Crosse at the top, the teams in 3 through 6 have gotten a lot better. So it's not to say the conference is weak, but Wartburg did their thing and knocked the Pioneers, the WIAC champs, out of the dance. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, Wartburg seems to be like the Grim Reaper of the WIAC. Like the last 3 seasons now, La Crosse in 2022, Whitewater in 23, and Bethel in 24. It's just, we see it time and time again, 3 years in a row now. But I found it interesting. Wartburg hadn't played them since 1955, but they've scrimmaged every year since 2008. Saw that here on your note sheet here. That was pretty telling. And Wartburg, their run defense continues to be absolutely spectacular, also generating a few turnovers as well. They held Brant Stair very quiet until the very end of the game when you scored a touchdown. But when you hold that guy to under 100 yards, let alone to only 38, you're going to give yourself a really good chance to win. And Wartburg leaned down their defense in their run game, and they proved again that they have a knack for knocking out those WIAC teams.
Yeah, they certainly earned that one, dude. I think that's the best way to say it. And, a low-scoring affair. You talked about the teams, even though they haven't played in that long, they're very familiar with each other, right, because of those preseason kind of contests. And you look at that stat. Wartburg is 52-3 in their last 10 seasons at Walson Hoover Stadium. That's incredible.
Wow. Just talk about home field advantage. And they're underdogs this week, too.
Yeah.
It's crazy at home.
That's maybe someone's got to see that stat. Some algorithm's got to see that one. They're 10-1 in their last 11 playoff games at home, and it's just really, really impressive stuff. That Wartburg squad is tough to beat, and we saw them give North Central all they could handle, and that's semifinal round last year. And it feels like this team is poised to make a very similar run. We had talked about that linebacker core last year. They bring back some good returners in that defensive front. They do lose some of those big pieces, but it seems like Wartburg, the Knights have rebuilt and reloaded.
I'm not surprised. I'm sure you're not either. So.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Now talk about Lake Forest goes into Bethel, and if I remember correctly, Lake Forest was supposed to host this game, but because of their facilities or something along those lines, this game got moved over, and Bethel gets themselves another home game. So now this Bethel Royal squad has gone from being faked out in the first round in a co-college game. They thought they were going on the road. It comes back at home. Now you're supposed to go on the road in round 2. Lake Forest not up to snuff as far as the NCAA standards go. They get 2 home games in probably the weirdest fashion possible. But tell me about this Royals win over the Foresters.
Yeah, Lake Forest came out and they battled early. It was really close here at halftime, but second half, Bethel just kind of took it and ran with it. They had a really, really strong performance on the ground. Aaron Ellingson, 132 yards and 2 touchdowns for the kid. Bethel put up, obviously, 48 points, very explosive on offense. That time of possession battle was interesting. Lake Forest had won it 34-26, and I think that might have been due to the fact that they scored. I mean, when Bethel got the ball, they scored pretty quickly, especially in the second half. And Bethel also generated 3 turnovers, which was a huge selling point in this one that kind of put the icing on the cake and essentially wrapped things up.
100%. Aaron Ellingson on the ground for that Bethel squad, averaging 6 a pop. He had 22 carries for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Big day for him. And receiving-wise, they did a really good job of spreading the ball out. Now, Micah Newald, he had 11 catches on the day, which was a big for him. But then you go down the list, Joey Kidder, Joe Kawaja, Will Eliason. A lot of these guys start making contributions. Defensively, had some big-time contributors in this Bethel squad. I mean, Nate Farm, 12 tackles in the day. Excuse me there. I had to read that one twice. But some other big-time moves. And Bethel squad, I think, doesn't get talked about maybe nearly enough, but they just continue to rise, continue to take care of business. But at this point in the game, there is no riding under the radar, right? You're down into the Sweet 16. There's no more, I'm not going to say there's no more underdogs because there's always an underdog and everyone loves that story, but there's no more flying under the radar, right? Everyone knows about you. Everyone knows exactly what they're going to get from you. And Wartburg will not be surprised by this team at all next week. Not to see the teams in the past have, but I know I haven't maybe seen as much on them from some other places as maybe I'd expected. So we'll see what Beth can do to keep going here. Outscoring the Foresters 35-7 in the final 30 minutes. That is what you call backs against the wall.
Going on a run.
Yeah. Okay, moving forward. Defending national champs, Cortland, Jimmy. They got it done, but not in the most convincing fashion. They beat Endicott 17-9 at their place. They'll host again this week, but tell me about this Red Dragon squad and against the Gulls.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. So the big stat of this game, if you can believe this, a total combined of 214 passing yards in this game. Absolutely very minimal air attack.
Yeah, that's unreal.
That's a testament to both secondaries, getting good pressure on the quarterback as well. I was honestly really, really surprised that Cortland only scored 17 points. I didn't believe Endicott had the kind of defense to hold Cortland, the national defending champion, to only 17. But it's funny too, because I think this is probably when they found out they were playing Cortland, they're like, "Oh, we get our chance for revenge." And obviously did not see that. But very slow start offensively for Endicott. And they bounced back and had a great second half. Tried to balance it out a lot more, but just could develop a little bit short in this one.
This was one that the broadcast difficulties, dude. I wish I could have watched this game. I had it sitting on the left side of my TV screen here in the basement. I was getting up all my games, and the whole time I see the damn screen of ESPN technical difficulties. We'll be right back. And eventually I turned it off. I don't know if they got the stream up eventually. I didn't really go back to check, but that was frustrating. And that's not like probably not strictly an ESPN thing. It's probably more to do with, the setup at Cortland and what they had going on, but that's tough. That is really tough. And if you would have told me that Endicott held Cortland to 17, I would have been very surprised to hear that they still lost, to be honest with you. And Cortland in that first half, they had about 240 yards. It was 14-0, and things were going their way. Maybe not the way that we expected, but they were going their way. They only finished with 316. That second half, they were pretty much shut down offensively, and that was a gritty third and fourth quarter. But second straight year, Jimmy, the Red Dragons end Endicott's season in the playoffs. They ruined a lot of Cinderella stories last year, en route to becoming a Cinderella story themselves, right? You talk about an Endicott team that was a very feel-good story last year. How about Grove City? How about Alma? I mean, you go down the list of all these teams that were kind of a first-timer into that role, and Cortland being that team as well, and it looks like they're here to ruin a bunch of Thanksgiving and Christmas wishes once again.
Yeah, well, then we'll see, obviously, next week in Springfield, they can do the same. So.
Yes, that one, very excited about. Had Arson on the show tonight, and watching him play, Jimmy, is fun. Watching him play football is fun. As a guy who likes to run in between the tackles myself, that dude is a beast. Him in Springfield, they took down UMass Dartmouth 54-27 in, again, what was a very dominant performance. This game was 34-14 at half, so it wasn't necessarily out of hand if you're on the Corsairs over there, but this Springfield team was playing at an incredible clip. They scored on 3 consecutive possessions going into halftime, and then on the other side of the half, they just kept things going here. I mean, this team, the fullback duo, I talked about Arson Stefan and Joseph Canizaro, they combined for 53 rushes, 311 yards. Springfield held the ball for almost 40 minutes, had almost 500 yards of offense on the ground alone.
Yeah, it's just a stellar offensive performance. They're going to have to lean on that actually against Cortland too. Cortland's run defense is pretty sturdy. And then, yeah, we'll have to see if they can lean on that identity next week and hopefully use a little bit of the formula that Endicott used. I'm sure they're going to watch that film and see what Endicott did to slow down that Cortland offense.
Yeah, and this UMass Dartmouth offense, I mean, scoring 27 points seems pretty normal, but for Dante Aviles, that's a low total for them. They got a quarterback and an offensive skill group over there that I think they're really, really confident in, and they've brought in some postseason awards already, and that's a really telling performance for that Springfield defense. Now, I think, and we'll talk more about it later on, but the key for them, Springfield moving forward, is we talked about that time possession. If you can keep the ball out of Cortland's hands, that's the recipe for success for beating them. It's honestly, to me, is as simple as that. And when I say it's as simple as that, it's a lot easier said into a microphone than done on a football field. But if someone has the recipe to do that, it feels like Springfield could certainly be one of those top candidates to knock off the defending national champs. Now, with that being said, they're going to get Cortland's A game as any team would at this stage in the game. But the Pride, they advanced to the NCAA third round for the first time since 2000. They're going up to Cortland, and they set a couple records during this game as well. The most points in the season at 540, and the most points in a postseason game at 54.
Wild. Setting records in the playoffs, man. Oh, man.
540 points throughout the course of a season is pretty nuts. I'm trying to think, because they would have played, 12? Yeah, 12 to this point.
Yeah.
So you're looking at mid to high 40s? My math is not there. My math is absolutely not there. We just know it's good. We know it's really good.
Yeah.
What else is really good? That's Hope football. And I got to tune into this one for a little bit here. The Flying Dutchman at home, they take down Aurora 49-21. And both offenses getting going early, a bit of back and forth, the turning point. It felt like to me, watching the game, Hope, they recovered to fumble inside the Aurora 15-yard line. They scored. It was a fake run by Wellman. The quarterback kind of tucked it, ran up to the line of scrimmage. I wouldn't quite call it a jump pass, but he dips it off to the running back, and he goes in and scores. And that felt like those couple of plays kind of felt like the turning point for this Hope squad. I got highlights here courtesy of Fox 17. Jimmy, talk to me about this one.
Yeah, Hope's super efficient in the pass game. 80% completion from Bethel. I think that was really critical for them. 208 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air as well. Obviously, Tyler Amos had a nice little game on the ground as well. 95 yards and a touchdown. 3 rushing touchdowns for Hope, Flying Dutchman. They're getting it done on the ground. 243 yards as a team, averaging 5.3 yards a carry as well. So look for them to lean on that run game next week against North Central.
I agree with you there, and that's going to be, I think, one of the more marquee matchups of this next round. And watching this Hope offense, it felt like they could do no wrong for certain points of this game. And being in your home environment also sounds pretty good. Check out those snowbanks on the edge of the stadium there. We need to see a snow angel celebration out of one of these guys semi-soon. It feels like that's got to be coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah, you'd hope so. Let's see.
Come on, that's a layup. Talking about you hope so.
When I snowed at practice, I did one, so I was hoping.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. First postseason victory in program history. Hope they'd lost their 5 previous postseason appearances, man.
Oh, that's brutal. I mean,
and
they got one now, though.
Yeah, right? I mean, yeah, it's nice to have that now, but I think anyone who knows Coach Sturzma over there and kind of that staff and what they've been able to do. And I think a lot of that that staff revolves what they do off the field, the relationships they have with those guys. You're not going to find a more committed bunch in D3 football, I think. And now for them to start pairing that kind of culture with the on-the-field expectations and kind of that success that we're starting to see is really exciting stuff. The Flying Dutchman forced a season-high 3 interceptions for that quarterback out of Aurora, generated 5 turnovers total. Feels pretty important. And I went dark.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just realized figuring it out. I was like, "What's going on?"
Hold on. Keeping talking about this Hope team, though, they set a school record as well for points in the season, 492. So that's a really great cap there. But I don't want to sound like their season's over, because it's certainly not. They're going to give North Central their A game this week. Let's talk about that North Central squad. 42-17 over a Whitworth team that I think we were generally played pretty high on, and I don't think either of us expected them to go into Illinois and win this game outright, but I think maybe we expected a little bit more out of this Whitworth squad. We thought the physicality of this Whitworth team matched up pretty well compared to some of the other squads that North Central saw throughout the course of the regular season. But I think if there's one thing we know about this Cardinal squad, Jimmy, is that they step up when they need to. And when it comes to the playoffs, there are not many in that same bracket.
No, and we saw that from the immediate start of this football game. A pick six on the first play from scrimmage from Will Vernon. North Central just continues to be dominant. Joe Sacco, the Cardinals rushing back. I go on and on about it. I've said this before on the show. I'm sick of these guys. I just wanted it to be late in the season so they start playing close games, man. I feel like they just blow everybody out.
I'm with you there. And that's, again, one of these teams that maybe we hadn't talked about a whole lot over the course of the season, just because, like you said, outside of maybe here or there, these games are, just not maybe worth. And you get from the standpoint of a fan standpoint, I'm sure they're worth talking about, but for our sake, we're trying to talk about these competitive games. They have not really been in those, and this one was kind of much in the same. 21-point first quarter for the Cards. Felt like maybe that sealed the deal, and they just were rolling from there. This was kind of a wire-to-wire victory. You talked about Will Vernon, the interception he returned, Joe Sacco, the rushing attack, and just so much going for this course. Oh, boy. North Central, Corth Central. That would have been that's a mix-up. But it only gets better from here on out, and I'm really excited to see what they do with this Hope team that I think is really physical at the point of attack. And you talk about it's going to be a great test for this Cardinal defense after watching what Hope and Ben Wellman and those guys have been able to do for the Flying Dutchman. So I definitely think you'll get the line there, favored by 21.5. I certainly would favor North Central going into this one. I don't know if my line would be that big, Jim.
Yeah, we'll see. North Central is pretty darn good, but hey, this Hope team, they're feisty. They're not going to go down without a fight. I tell you that much.
No, I am excited for that one. As far as individual performances go, in this one for the Cardinals, looking at who had good days. Lanen, I think, he didn't have to do a whole lot when it comes to the box score. Now, he obviously made his mark on this game. He was incredibly efficient. When I say he didn't have to do a whole lot is because he was so good at what he did. 10 of 13, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. Had a little bit going on the ground as well, but Sacco was kind of the guy for them on the day. They spread out the rushing attack quite well, North Central did. Ryan Blair, who we had on the show just a week ago, they threw the ball 48 times and had a little bit of success, 230 yards, touchdown, did have the pick to open things up, but after that did bounce back in a pretty decent way. Spread the ball out to a bunch of different receivers, but again, it was North Central across the board, just making way too many plays. Didn't get after the quarterback as much as I thought they might in this one. Only 2 sacks for that Cardinal defense on the day, quite a few TFLs. Let's talk, though. This one is a very interesting one. Mary Hardin-Baylor, Harden-Simmons, the third time they've played this year. The Cowboys have taken the first 2 meetings in the regular season. They win the ASC outright again. In the playoffs, though, Jimmy, when it matters, talk to me. What happens?
We said this last week. It's really, really hard to beat a team 3 times, and it turned out to be really hard. Mary Harden-Baylor coming out on top in this one, 17-13. The 6th time they've ended the Cowboys season in the playoffs. That's got a sting against your rival. Durand Hill, by the way, absolutely stellar performance. 12 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and an interception. That's like prime Khalil Mack stats right there for the kid. Another really, I noticed this earlier in the Endicott Cortland game. Not a lot of passing going on this one. Only a combined 231 total passing yards throughout this entire ball game, which I found really interesting. And both teams have pretty solid rushing attacks as well, so that must be part of the reason. But you think that these teams, Mary Hardin-Baylor, is going to have to start throwing the ball a bit more effectively if they want to advance in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that matchup in a second with Linfield that's looming, on the weekend. But you said it, really hard to beat a team 3 times. It's the only road win for a D3 team in the round of 32. And when you talk about road win, like you're still in state. It wasn't like traveling, anything too ridiculous. But a road win at a rival in this fashion is a pretty big deal. And now you've got people talking about, well, who do you rank higher now? Is it UMHB because they won and you have the recency bias? Is it Harden-Simmons because they have the 2 results from earlier in the season? Who knows? Who cares? At this point, it's like who's left to play. And if you're the crew, that's okay. We're still in the dance. Who cares about where people are going to rank us at the end of the year? We're still playing meaningful football, and I think that's all they could ask for.
No, absolutely right. I don't think they're worried about any sort of rankings. They're just worried about getting to the next week. I want to know.
100%. And their opponent this week, Linfield, this was a stinker of a game. The 65-3 over Texas Lutheran. And, I mean, TLU had to make the trip up there, and it's not an easy trip to make, not an easy place to play in, but 65-3. Good God, dude.
Yeah, that's tough. That's brutal. Pretty similar to their only other match, actually, 54-8 in the 1974 NAIA playoffs. So,
74.
Yeah, 74. That was a wild pull from you there. That's nice. That's a nice
my dad
pull.
was 4 years old the last time these 2 teams played.
Yeah, my dad was 5.
Not too much to say on this one. I mean, Linfield we knew was very good. They win their conference outright again and did some, some really good things en route to that. And they were very good. I mean, they were very, very good. I don't know if there's too much to add on to that. Had an interception from Chance Sparks, seemed like a big play, a turning point in the game, but it was all just incredibly downhill. Connor Wolf led him in receiving, 3 catches, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And there was a lot of really good things to be happy about here. Blake Eaton, 5 touchdowns through the air, 291 yards for the quarterback there. And I don't know what to add on to this one, dude. There's not a whole lot of other stuff. All of Eaton's touchdowns were in the first half. That's pretty ridiculous. And that's it. I mean, Linfield gets UMHB, and now we kind of roll from here.
Yeah, well, I'm pumped for that one. I think Linfield's a pretty big favorite in that game. I think Mayor Harden-Simmons might surprise some people. So we'll see how that goes.
Grove City at Johns Hopkins. This one, I mean, talk about incredibly back and forth. Came down to literally the last minute. Grove City, they got a chance to tie it up at the end of the game. It sails wide. Blue Jays, they hang on to win at home, Jimmy, 17-14. This one probably lived up to the bill more than most when it came to, I guess, some of the more photo finishes or some of the more competitive games that we thought we were going to get out of this weekend. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, we definitely got a competitive one here coming down to the last second. So these 2 things I want to note, 2 specific players that played in this game. Cole Crotty for Johns Hopkins, 10 catches, 148. And Scott Frazier, I don't know if this is a typo or not, with 19 catches and 231 yards and a touchdown. I mean,
hello,
mind-boggling performance from him. Obviously tough for Grove City. Back-to-back years, just a heart-wrenching loss in the playoffs, but Johns Hopkins moves on.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this Grove City kicker, and I was double-checked to see if it's the same one as last year. But remember that Grove City kick sails wide last year, and that would allow Cortland to advance. This year, the kick sails wide, and Johns Hopkins are the beneficiaries. That is a tough way to close out your season the last 2 years, man. I really feel for them. Because they've done so much really good stuff. I mean, you looked at, there was a graphic they put out about their senior class that I should have pulled up and I don't, but about what they were able to accomplish compared to, the past and relatively speaking. There's so many firsts for this Grove City team. They went from, being on the outside looking in of the PAC to being kind of in the hunt and winning a couple of those bowl games and building up that confidence, then winning it outright last year and getting to the playoffs, and doing all these really good things. So, yes, a lot to be really excited about if you're Grove City, but it felt like after last year, the expectations were just that much higher for the Wolverines. Yeah. So that's a tough one to stomach for them. I did want to note, I found a really cool tweet. I don't know. Let's see here. There's a really cool picture post-game of all these guys basically circled up at midfield. And it's Grove City, it's Johns Hopkins, staffers and players from both teams. And I think this is their D-line coach here, Mario Bird. He tweets that I heard a parent say post-game this was the, quote, best play of the day. I don't disagree. And it looks to be some kind of prayer circle, all of them getting together. Just a really neat moment, a great football game with two incredible opponents. And the fact that in college football, where we see all of these teams that, you know, they finish the game, they want to plant the flag, and they want to get at it with each other and fight at midfield. And there's all these different, you know, things going on post-game. To see this at this level of football is really refreshing, Jimmy. And it's good to see that we got a bunch of guys here that battle it out for 4 quarters, and when it's all said and done, are going to go their separate ways and have what seems like a good amount of respect for one another.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how the game should be played. You know, it's good. It's very refreshing to see that.
It is. There was some notes too about the back of the Johns Hopkins end zone that has a bunch of different lines on it, and it's kind of a different deal. And I don't think you can't see my screen yet, but did you see the tweet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they play Division I lacrosse there. So
oh, yeah.
I think that, yeah.
And you and I and most people that follow sports know that. But there are certainly some that do not. So a lot of different lines for lacrosse, of course. The one thing that is really odd, and I don't blame people for questioning this, it looks like the field goal post is in the middle of the end zone, like a CFL, I believe, does kind of that same deal. Or is it like one of the other leagues? Or I know rugby has something that's just like that, actually. And that is because the end zone is actually in front of it. You can see the pylon there, but the actual markings are on the end of the field. It's a whole deal. But that where the Hopkins is colored in is not the real end zone, and I think that might be really trippy for people playing or seeing that for the first time.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's got to be tough to see for sure.
That is hilarious, dude. But yeah, I was cracking up at that one. Nonetheless, big win for the Blue Jays, getting it done, and I think finding different ways to win than what we're used to for that Johns Hopkins squad, especially coming off of last year. But Maryville at DePauw, the home team, that game streak keeps going. DePauw, the Tigers, that take this one 45-20, Jimmy.
Yeah, DePauw just been absolutely incredible at home. That's their 13th straight victory at Blackstock for the fellas. 45 points for the 10th time this season.
Yeah.
They scored at least 42 in the 9th straight time that it's happened to really consistent offensively all the way. DePauw was never trailing in this game as well. They've outscored their opponents 130-14 in the first quarter of games this season. So getting out to a big start is huge for those guys. And Robbie Ballantine for DePauw had himself a game, 9 catches for 194 and 2 touchdowns for DePauw.
That is big time. Talk about that offensive success, man. First 3 offensive possessions, never trailed. Those are some big time indicators of early success, right? And the Scots from Maryville, they pick up their initial first down on the next series. Jonathan Bruder comes in. He recovers a fumble in Maryville territory, takes it 35 yards. He laterals it to Joey Rowland. He gets stopped at the 8, and they just continue to roll. This DePauw team, it just goes and goes and goes. And we talked about the Monon Bell game just a couple weeks ago, and this team continues to just roll. It feels like the Tigers have a lot of momentum on their side. One of the better defenses, I would say, left in the Sweet 16. I would certainly put DePauw right in that number. And the senior class for DePauw, for the 4-year mark, their record has been 39-6, which is the most wins by a DePauw class in their program's history. 11th win of the season, program record. So many firsts for this DePauw team, and moving forward, they're going to need another one because this Salisbury team is Johns Hopkins team, that would be their matchup. Sorry, get the brackets mixed up.
Good.
Going down the list. But they would need another one, certainly, against Johns Hopkins. They are certainly favored in that one. So I'm excited to talk about that matchup more later in the week. But now we can talk to Salisbury. 33-13 over this Kings team. And this one, they wasted no time. First play from scrimmage, Ronald Clark, 40 yards through the middle. That gives the Gulls a 7-0 lead. Kings, they didn't get a first down in the first quarter, and they were held throughout the entire game, 217 yards of total offense.
Yeah, really tough, especially when Salisbury runs for 246 yards as a team with 5.5 yards per carry on the ground. Really, really efficient there. Didn't really throw the ball a whole lot. Their identity most of the year has been on the run game. But 99 yards and a touchdown for Cyrus McGowan. Yeah, not a whole lot of scoring in this one for Kings. Obviously, their offense being held to just 217 yards, as you mentioned. But Salisbury, man, they got a pretty rock-solid defense over there. I tell you what, man. I tell you what.
That they do. And you look out the course of this season, dude, that's been something that has been a constant for this Salisbury squad. And taking a look at their schedule here, what they've been able to do in going into the playoffs. And the MPI rankings certainly favored them in that way as well. But some of their better performances, you look at week 3 of the season, they go into John Hopkins, they hold that team to 13 points offensively. That felt like one of the bigger moments from early in the year. And they didn't face a ton of great competition throughout the remainder of that NJAC season. I don't think there were too many teams in there that are giving them a run for their money. Rowan had kind of a shot there, but we haven't seen too much from them. So it's always curious to see, like a North Central, what do they do when they get into these meaningful football games? They stepped up in this one. Now they got Randolph-Macon next round. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I was about to say it's going to be. That's like the closest. That's actually a pick-em next to this. There's no favorite in this game according to the Hanster ratings. It's there's no spread, so it's going to be a really, really interesting one.
That's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, this Salisbury defense has stepped up, I think, time and time again, and they were dominant early on. I don't think Kings, they ever even gave them a chance or a glimpse of hope in that first half, and they put their foot on the gas in the second half. But let's talk about that Randolph-Macon squad. 38-22 over a Washington and Jefferson team that got the auto bid out of the pack, which has been one of the best conferences in D3 football this year. A lot to like if you are a Yellow Jackets fan.
No, yeah, for sure. And it was a little scary of a start, going down 14-0, obviously.
Yes.
But they weren't down 14-0 for too long, as we saw there. Really efficient run game, as we see. Like a lot of these teams doing really well in the playoffs, winning football games, running for 220 yards on the ground. Only 4.5 yards per carry, so they weren't running as efficient as the teams we've mentioned previously. But 2 touchdown passes from Dante Casciola. So somewhat balanced, but obviously you want to throw the ball a little bit more. I found also interesting, they only had one receiver with more than 6 yards in this game. Jason Moore with 4 catches for 125, but the next guy down the list had 6 yards.
Yeah, so we saw some of those deep shots there. I mean, that was those were pivotal type moments too. I mean, you talked about the 14-point deficit, like that's big, and to do that, thankfully at home is nice, but that's 38 unanswered points, dude.
Yep. And then that's thanks to defense coming up with 2 picks as well for them. So defense balled out after a slow start for them, but they made some adjustments clearly and had balled out the rest of the game.
They did. That was the largest comeback in an NCAA playoff game for RMC. They trailed by 14, like we talked about, came back to win, and that's the biggest deficit in their history that they've had to overcome. So another great matchup there we'll certainly be talking about. We've got, looks like 2 more games to break down before we move on. Carnegie Mellon, another pack squad. They get it done at home against a Center College team. And 24-15, this one, that has the potential of being like a scoregami, it feels like.
No, I was just about to say that. That's hilarious.
The 15
you stole my thunder.
It's just kind of an odd. It just feels like just a little bit of an oddity. But talk about this Tartan football squad.
Yeah. Speaking of, so you talk about the score being an outlier. How about this as an outlier? 24 straight home victories.
Yes.
Just absolutely incredible. Coming into play again, obviously only one team getting a victory on the road, and Center was not one of them, unfortunately. Robert Corr becomes all-time program leader in total tackles, so shout out to him, passing over Aaron Lewis's mark. He's also moved 3rd on the all-time sacks list, so we got to give credit for this dude. 22, only 3 more necessary to jump into 2nd, and he's going to have a big opportunity to do that next week in the biggest game of his young career.
Yeah, and you talk about that defense, dude. How about the single-game record for rushing yards allowed? Center College. -33 yards net rushing on the ground.
Yeah, I wanted you to say that one because I know you probably pulled that one out. You probably like, this is the biggest stat. Like,
and they scored 15.
I know, just unbelievable.
You ran for negative net yardage, and you scored 15 points against a really solid opponent.
Yeah.
That's almost most impressive than anything else we've talked about. The previous record was actually, for Carnegie Mellon, was set earlier this year against Allegheny with a total of -26.
Yeah, just wacky stuff. And also another thing, I know you said on here, the Tartans have 46 straight games where they have led after 3 quarters. That is impressive stuff.
Yeah, they've won them all. When you're leading after 3 quarters, you won them all. And the 10th opponent this season, they've held under 100 yards on the ground. This rushing defense, you talked about Curry earlier on and some of those people that make that up. And this is just a team that does not collapse. They don't fold under any kind of pressure, and that's gonna treat them very well as we move through the next couple rounds of the playoffs here. And finally, a team that maybe didn't stand up to the pressure quite as well, Jimmy. That's John Carroll at Mount Union, 42-7. It was a really tough start for JCU. Purple Raiders, they scored first. They doubled down, had that strip sack touchdown, Rossi Moore. That was demoralizing for that team on the road. I was watching the game live when that happened. The wind gets taken out of the sails. You're at Mount Union. There's so much that comes with that already, and then you concede a play like that, and it was just like, it hurt. You could just tell that the momentum shifted right there. I don't think John Carroll ever got it back. The 35th NCAA playoff appearance for Mount Union. That's an NCAA Division III record, and Mount Union is now 5-0 against John Carroll in the NCAA playoffs. They're moving to the NCAC next fall, so if you're a Purple Raider fan, that's good riddance to those Blue Streaks, and that's a great way to close out that series.
Yeah, and obviously, being the earlier in the season that John Carroll gave him a lot better of a game, I was really, really surprised to see this one. Being your rival, I mean, you don't really imagine games being blowouts like this, but we saw that here. But really tough way to go out for John Carroll. They were not expecting that to be the end of their season. I couldn't.
Not in that fashion, right? You talked about the contest earlier on, and that would have been the last thing on their bingo card. And those guys, it's easy to get up for a playoff game, let alone against a squad like Mount Union. So tough for them. But again, the credit should be certainly with Mount Union. They stepped up, and they're playing some of their best ball right now. And I would put them in the top 2 or 3 favorites right now to win it all, in my book.
Oh, absolutely. They got to be right up there. And they have a tough Carnegie Mellon team next week, though, so we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, that rushing defense that we talked about with Tartans there, that's going to be the matchup for me in that one. Can Mount Union establish themselves early like they've been able to in most of their contests? I feel like you're going to have to wear down that defense from Carnegie Mellon, and that's one of the better matchups of this Sweet 16. We talked about Cortland and Springfield earlier, Johns Hopkins, DePauw, UMHB, Linfield, Susquehanna, St. John's, Hope, North Central. Still so much football to be played because it's been delayed, obviously, because of that 40-team playoff field, and we're going to be playing into January here, Jim. If you had to pick, well, again, we'll talk more later in the week about these contests, but if you had to pick one that is the most intriguing to you, to say, in a way, what would you pick?
Intriguing. I'm going to go with Wartburg.
Really?
Because obviously, if I had to pick who was in the national championship, I'd say North Central, but at the same time, it's like Wartburg has a knack for knocking off teams. I'm really looking forward to see what this Wartburg team can do, for sure.
I'm with you there. I think matchup-wise for me, this Cortland-Springfield game is going to tell me a lot about both these teams. And I talked about it earlier. Springfield and their ability to potentially literally just keep the ball away and out of the hands of Zach Boyes and that Red Dragon offense is going to be the way that somebody will beat this Cortland team, if that happens, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen this weekend. I'm not saying it's going to happen at all. But if that happens, that is going to be the recipe for success. I talked about it earlier. It's very simple in theory. If you don't let the opposing offense have the ball, they cannot score. And Cortland, although their defense has shown up well for them, like this Endicott game this previous week, if Springfield is able and allowed to get up on top of them early and play to their style of ball, wearing teams down, we talked about with Arson earlier on, they're a big play waiting to happen, and that offensive attack there for the Pride. That game makes me very, very curious. And a team in Springfield that just, I believe, 2 years ago went up to Cortland and played as well. So maybe left a bad taste in their mouth last time they were in upstate New York. Yeah,
no, certainly. I think they're going to attempt to change that.
Yeah, so I'm excited, dude. This is going to be pretty sweet. And we haven't even talked about the stadium photo I used in the graphic is in Houston there, and that's where the championship's going to be played this year. So we'll talk about that as it gets closer. But for tonight, I think that kind of encapsulates all we need to know, dude. Thank you very much. Just a lot of really good football.
Yeah, and our job's only going to get more and more fun as we continue here, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, because then we get to really dial in. Like, we just talked about 16 different games.
I know.
And it's hard to go in depth on each of them because you just spread so thin. So as we get down to 8, 4, and 2, and finally a national championship game, dude, this is going to be much more fun because we really can dive into the weeds and get talking about these squads.